you can imagine this is my top priority right now in Albemarle County. I've been working on this for 2 years.
Mhm.
Um, I worked at the end of last year with SELC, Southern Environmental Law Center, working with supervisors, building relationships to a point, not relationship, but leveraging my relationships. Um, and and that work, along with SELC, working together, kind of a coalition, tiny coalition, we're able to convince Jim Andrews, the chair, that there need to be a stopgap ordinance. And
Mhm.
that showed up pretty quickly. We were surprised that they were going to move into phase two so soon, but I suspect that the combination of the economic development initiatives that the county and the EDA are going through, the relationship with data centers to those economic development initiatives, which are substantial. Um, and this is not just Charlottesville. This is a corridor that extends from Fauquier County to the city of Charlottesville, focusing on
Mhm.
intelligence, defense, biomed, biotech, life sciences. It's pretty massive. So there's that. Then they went through their budget process and they raised real estate 4 cents on a dollar, and there's a huge amount of pushback. When I talked to some supervisors, they went from a year ago there'll be no data centers in the county to we have to have data centers because we have a fiscal problem. And it's
Mhm.
not diversification as much of it is finding significant sources of revenue,
Mhm.
because they can't get all the revenue from data centers. So it's a given that there's so where we are now. I'll tell you what we're doing. We have been working after this next phase started with SELC, Community Climate Collaborative, the Piedmont Group of the Sierra Club, including a representative of Sierra Club Virginia, who PEC works with at a state level. And so it's not a formal coalition. We've discussed on whether there should be sign-on letters, but there's a lot of work being done, and
Mhm.
we coordinate and we talk to each other. And we share talking points. We're not at the point where it's strategic right now. We don't feel we're going to get the traction of just having a big mass of organizations with a huge sign-on letter saying, here's where to go. You're correct that they need to hear from their constituents, not just the environmental or the energy or they really need to hear that. After the last work session with the board is split in half
Mhm.
with this is really important because this is how you win. The board is split in half. Mike Pruitt is solidly against data
Mhm.
centers being by right above 40,000 square feet in industrial districts. And so is Ann Malik. And Jim Andrews is mostly opposed, but his real stated concern is basically Albemarle County will never achieve its climate goals by allowing multiple large scale data centers into the county. So to give you a sense of scale, a 5,000 square foot data center could require anything from 50 megawatts to 100 megawatts of power. That's the power that you would need to power all the houses in the county. And Woodridge Solar is 138 on its best day, its nameplate. So it never was going to power 25,000 homes. It was going to power a data center and a half. And that's where they were going to sell that power. So what we've been doing, this is what we're doing. We're going to, on the 16th of December, September, and I've asked Tom to send you all our action alert. We're going to have a kind of a town hall, a community meeting. It'll The details are in the Eventbrite, and it's open to the public. There'll be a limited number of people, but the more we want to fill up that room. We've done this before. Year and a half ago, we probably got 80 people at the Jefferson School. We will have more rooms than that, but that's going to be Julie Bolthouse, the director of land use, who works at a state level and regional level, providing context, and then I will be there talking about what's really happening in Albemarle County. and what are the impacts, potential impacts. We are going to be sending a postcard out. So we've harvested the mailing addresses for folks about, I can't remember my communications. I'm going to say it's a half mile around every one of these overlay districts, and they will receive a postcard telling you you may be getting a data center near you in the future, and this is what you need to do. So we're doing that. We've sent out our action alerts. Our action alerts go out to over 3,000 people every time we send it out, and that includes people in Albemarle and the city. This is not an Albemarle issue. This is a regional issue because transmission comes with it. I pay attention to the PJM interconnection projects every year, and there's a 765 kilovolt line coming from Fauquier all the way to Lake Anna, North Anna. It will go into Louisa, down into Hanover, into Goochland, going west into Fluvanna, and it will go, if that project survives, this is last year's project, it will go along the southern margins of the county, our county, Albemarle County, at Scottsville, and then it will go all the way down and hook up with a 765 at Joshua Falls substation just east of Lynchburg. So people need to understand that that is coming, as well as substations. And so what we did before we finalized our strategy with Jim Andrews was PEC made some really quick maps of all these light industrial districts. We already know where the fiber is because they need fiber, and you'd be surprised where fiber is. It's all over. And the other is transmission lines, and we show the transmission lines. And we know the county, I mean, the same locations that we found, the county identified a little less. That's the work that we're doing. And there's, it's a big tent. I think you need to be aware of all that because it's substantial. PEC we have a PR firm that's working with us. I've been on television 3 times now. And our mantra is basically responsible regulation and transparency. And so the county, the situation we're in right now is the county is taking the approach, for whatever reason, that if they have substantial performance requirements that are based on best practices that are scouring Virginia, that if they do that, they will simulate the condition requirements for a special use permit, and then that should be enough to protect public health, safety, and welfare. But they really haven't perfected those performance requirements. The noise ordinance will not be sufficient to deal with the kind of noise that comes out of data centers. Tier 4, EPA Tier 4 diesel generators, yes, they're better than Tier 2, but they're not absolutely clean. There will be impacts to the air. And we know from Loudoun County that when there was a peak load, I can't remember how many months ago, those data centers up there ran continuously their generators for 7 hours. That's the report we have from Loudoun now. So people were like, why are these generators running continuously? Well, it's because they require so much energy that it was impacting the grid. Right now, the grid cannot accommodate adding more data centers. And so 2 more things need to be considered. One is already the official monitor, PJM, is stating that data centers are going to need to bring their own power. So nobody's talking about that from the county. A gas-fired power plant next to which would be a disaster. And so I'm not sure it's even feasible, but this is real. The other is building transmission, getting these projects approved, and we pay for it, and then they never operate the data center. So PEC has branded that as a crisis by contract. The other concerning problem here is that the federal government, the executive branch, the president of the United States, could come up with a strong arm tactic that basically says, we're not going to allow states, through the SEC or even localities, to overregulate data centers. And that could pull the rug out from under the performance requirements that the county thinks they're going to rely on. So Water usage, sure. Using recycled water that are going to recirculate. There's still water usage. There are issues with that. It's not a zero problem. These are all very real. Having a data center replace what's at State Farm is across from a hospital. So we're going to be making maps right now. We're making maps showing all these districts, and then we're going to show these districts, and then we're going to show all the schools, hospitals, medical facilities, parks, recreational, and show the proximity. And mostly we'll be focusing on residential, how close they are. So I think the county thinks that they've got that figured out, but that puzzle piece is not exactly sorted out. And so what we need to do is convince at least three, because that will kill this ordinance. We need to convince 3 or 4 supervisors that this is just a bridge too far. Why do we need to go automatically? If it's revenue generation, data centers will come here if it makes sense financially, and if the entitlements are reduced down. I don't think that that's going to be such an impediment if we have a special use permit. And I will tell you that Loudoun County now requires their data centers by special use permit. After all these years of doing it by right, they got it wrong. And also Louisa County has shifted to by right in their technology overlay districts to now it's by conditional use permit, which is the same as the special use permit. So if there's this buyer's remorse, because these problems are site specific, Jim Andrews was right. You measure the sound properly with the right equipment, with the right criteria for evaluation, standing on the right of way on 29 below where the former Seed Distributions, Eagle Distribution, that's a data center overlay district right there at the corner of 64 and 29 on the southwest quadrant. But measuring it down below, several feet below the grade, below where that site would be operating, is very different. You might get a measurement that's really low, but if you're in the subdivision across the road, even if it's farther away, that sound can be transmitted across. So the county is basically saying, even though we have no experience dealing with data centers and a project, we've read a bunch of stuff, and I respect Bill Fritz. I've known him and worked with him in the past, and the same with Amelia McCauley. But why take the risk now? Why not start off with special use permits? Now, at the end, and you can thank Mike Pruitt. Mike Pruitt at the very end of that work session said, my understanding from what I'm hearing is we have a split. And Diana McKeel wanted to shut that conversation down. And I respect her. I work with Diana. She wanted to move it along. We don't have an election here. We're not voting. And he said, but how does the county staff move forward if half the supervisors are not comfortable with this, the proposal to have by right, above 40,000, all the way up to 500,000, and 3 are? Why would you move forward assuming that you would stick with this by right scenario when you've got 3 that don't? And in the end, Bill Fritz said, well, what I can do is come up with 2 options. One option would be what we see now with better performance. They know they have to fix those and they have to make them better. And then the other scenario would be to keep the limit at 40,000 square feet and anything above that special event, but still have performance requirements, which is the right way to go. You don't want to just have a special use permit and not have those performance requirements because of the risk that we're all taking with these projects. So the win here is to make sure we have at least 3 solid supervisors that are right there, and preferably 4. Just think about what Ann Malik said at the very end. We require a special use permit to increase the number of students in a daycare facility in the rural area. So if you go look, and you go look at all the by right and by special use permit in the industrial districts, and you look at the intensity of construction operation, it just makes no sense to make this leap so quickly at all. So I can't exactly address, because I don't do this work alone in PEC. Our headquarters is very much involved in what we're doing here. The whole issue of sort of a coalition or working together, What I can do is I can reach out to SELC, C3, Sierra Club, Piedmont Group, and say, and we've been monitoring this. We know there's other organizations that have interest in this. And so there may be something where what we need to do is first to simply get all the representatives so we have all the information, and it may need to be, okay, we need to have a virtual meeting and talk about strategy. I suspect that trying to coalesce everybody is going to be very difficult. There are groups out there that don't want to see any data centers at all. I can tell you, I get pressure within PEC. It's like they shouldn't be any, zero. And PEC's position is we're not focused on whether they should or shouldn't occur. We're focusing on the ordinance needs to be right. So we are not openly opposing or supporting data centers. There's a land use environmental policy committee presentation. You can only see them every 6 months from UVA, City of Charlottesville, and the foundations involved, and the county. And there's a presentation in there about data centers that Bill Fritz gave. This is a while ago. This is back in May or June. And their argument is we already have data centers. Supervisors like, oh, we already have data centers here. They're tiny. They're on West Main Street in the telephone company building. They are at UVA in a couple of buildings. There's one inside UVA's hospital. These are not large data centers. And there may be some advocates that may want to compromise and say, well, could we meet them somewhere? Can you do something between 40 and 125,000 square feet? I believe Falk here is at 50,000 square feet. The break line there is basically when you have to go into transmission versus using the distribution lines. So that's a big one. So a 40,000 square foot data center is Harris Teeter on US 250. That's about the size. A 500,000 square foot data center is every square foot of every building at Fifth Street Station, not just the Wegmans. Add them all up. That's a gargantuan building, and that's not even the biggest ones. They're even bigger than that. When you get into major, large-scale, hyperscale projects. So I think this is an economic development-driven initiative to open the door as wide as possible, to make it as easy as possible. The issue about tax and fiscal aspect of it, the tax side of it, is a smokescreen, and some have bought into it. This is really trying to make sure that data centers will be able to come here and support and be a part of the ecosystem, as the economic developers call it, that deal with the defense intelligence, and biomed, those sectors. And I calculated the difference, how much money you would need to collect from data centers using the revenue projections of the county. So I think 500,000 square feet was 16 million or 13 million. And I did the calculation of if you move the non-residential revenue from 11.3%, where it is now, because they're not happy with that, to 17, the top end of what Jeff Richardson, the county executive, said they're looking for. You find out what that delta is. It turns out you only need to build 2.5 500,000 square foot data centers to make up that difference. So I don't understand what all the anxiety is and why things have to move so quickly, and why they can't move if they do. And it's highly likely that we will see these. I'm getting ready to write an email to the county and say, I'm following up on our supporters who are asking me this question, and the gentleman who was at the community meeting who said, is the county or has the county been in conversations with data center developers? They just need to say yes or no. Because if it's yes, then we've been connecting the dots properly. And they likely will go up at Ravenna Futures, and I just met with Fred Missel, who is the Planning Commission chair, and he is the director of design and development for the UVA Foundation. He just told me this yesterday morning that UVA Foundation has over 3 million entitled square feet that they already have approved at Norfolk, excuse me, Norfolk, North Fork, in the Discovery Park. They've already got that. So they've got pad ready sites up there. The the county's already going to do pad ready sites. They just got millions of dollars to build the roads and the infrastructure. It's highly likely, and the transmission lines exist up there, and the fiber's on 29. So, I, I'm sorry, just trying to do this quick download. A lot of people are already working very hard to try to get this to go in the right direction. And my suggestion would be, if you're okay, I can reach out to SELC, C3, and we, Ren's here on the call, and to talk to the people that I'm working with at Sierra Club, saying there is a substantial interest from other entities. I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth. There's Civil 100 is an organization of organizations, so it really would be the member entities. But I just want to talk to them and let them know that this conversation has occurred, to prize them. We've been wondering whether we were going to see other NGOs, organizations show up. I think a little bit of the difference is that C3 in particular, PEC and SELC, we all have paid staff. We have support, we have communications, GIS support. We have a substantial, we have major donors who have donated PEC to do this work. And so we will continue to move forward. And I'm happy to share everything that we're doing. And I hope you find our action alert that was just sent out. We are more than willing to share all the talking points, all the analysis, we have all kinds of resources on PEC's website on resources themselves and then impacts. It's really important to remember that even Jim Andrews said a lot of people who said they don't want data centers or they're worried about them are misinformed. And they are convinced, even Jim to some degree, that the county staff has done their homework and come up with performance requirements that will 100%, avoid, minimize, or mitigate those impacts. And that's just not true. They're going in the right direction. But
the thing that I've heard is that the staff, I think it's county staff, has said we have no ability to control the energy usage of these data centers. And that, as Sage just pointed out, that's, it's maybe the cheap ball game, that's the effect on climate. And the county has a climate action plan, has a resilience plan. It's entertained becoming a biophilic, community. How does that square with what they're proposing or thinking about in terms of data center development? To me, that needs to be brought to the front as well.
Well, and if they had a special use permit requirement, they could require reporting every year on their energy usage of a data center, not to restrict it, but to become aware of it, to understand, particularly if you're doing climate work, the county wants to reduce its footprint. How do you do that if you don't know? And these data center operators guard this information, that and the water usage, like nobody's business. They do not want anybody to know how much they're using. But if they're required to do it, then at least the county can go in with its eyes open, understanding what are they up against. So that's a transparency piece. They're correct. They cannot control the transmission lines, but they do require special use permits for substations. So I find that ironic that they would have a special use permit requirement for the substation, but not for the data center. So that is problematic. And the other is they could require high performing buildings. That could be in the ordinance, whether it's a performance standard or it's part of a condition of. They could say this building needs to reduce its operating energy requirements to the lowest possible. And we want to know what that technology is, and we need commit. You know, this is what's going on in the industry right now. Even the industry wants to do it because they're in trouble. They can't. They're looking for any solution they can to try to reduce this. And I will also tell you that, you know, enforcement, the county is not going to hire any more staff. They don't have any money to do that. They'll replace a planner that leaves, but to enforce a noise ordinance after the fact, or generators running continuously, even tier 4 generators, or ones that are fueled by natural gas, what are you going to do? Knock on the door and say, or at the gate, actually, you know, let me in. I want to turn you off. You're going to do a cease and desist. So that's in there as well.
We have a number of other questions, and I want to get to those. Bob, could you lead us off?
Yes, I'm a resident of the Rio Magisterial District. So Ned Galloway is the supervisor, and I know Ned from campaigns in the past. The one point that I will make to him is that if you don't have the special use permit, if you give that away, you give away your power.
Yeah.
You don't have any control, and that leaves you powerless because someone could come in with a really horrendous thing that nominally meets the standards that are being put in, and you can't stop them. And it would be 500,000. It's foolish for anyone in government to give up their power to control the situation. And I think that would be the argument that I would make with him over and over again.
Can I just say something about that? Because what you need to tell him is a 500,000 square foot data center with 20 to 30 generators is not Office Depot or Home Depot or Lowe's. He said we didn't require anything for Home Depot other than to go through the ARB. Why would we? On what planet does he live on? And I like Ned, and I talk with him. Home Depot doesn't need 30 diesel generators. It doesn't store diesel fuel in big tanks. It doesn't have a substation. To minimize this down, and this is what Bill Fritz has done, they're just big office buildings. It's not a problem.
The Home Depot was built up at Fashion Square Mall. So you already have a commercial enterprise that was there for decades. So it's not like you're adding anything to it. You're just replacing one store with another. But I will get in touch with Ned and relay some of the points. And I haven't been able to keep up with you, Rob. You've gone very fast with a lot of information. So I think we'll be looking for a summary somewhere.
Well, go ahead, Rob.
I mean, anybody can reach out to me anytime, and I'm happy to have a much slower conversation. I just didn't want to.
I think you're getting something off your chest, Rob. I just get that sense.
One more point. I'm hoping that you'll be here for the member organizations reports, because at that time I will be inviting everyone to the Charlottesville Center for Peace and Justice community gathering. We're inviting more than 70 different organizations to have representatives there. We've invited Indivisible, SAGE. I've contacted several members there. The executive director of the ACLU, Mary Bauer, has plans to be there. And I'm working with a friend from Toastmasters who's employed by SELC. She's going to try to get as many people from SELC there as well. So we're really trying to bring together as many people. And the elephant that's not in the room, which is a phrase I've used before, is the possibility of federal action from the executive branch. Yeah. That would be totally arbitrary and capricious, but could be devastating. So our theme is protecting our democracy, our Constitution, and the people who will be harmed now and in the future by this current administration. More on that later.
Thanks, Bob. Tom, you have a question?
Yeah, Rob, first, thanks for all the terrific work the PEC is doing. It's really outstanding. I mean, really impressive as hell. And I forwarded the email you sent out today already to the Seville listserv. I'll keep doing that. I have two questions. One is I was looking at a document today on data centers on the Engage Albemarle site, and I noticed they listed 4 potential data center overlay districts. And I was wondering, is the number of overlay districts something that's being kicked around now? Is it all of them are possibly planned, or is it maybe just 1, or maybe 2, or maybe 3 to start out with?
My understanding is that the county staff had some kind of criteria to decide where those overlay districts would be. Part of it was access to 230 kilovolt transmission lines. They didn't mention anything about fiber, but fiber is not that hard to run. And they looked at what other kinds of, what was around those existing light industrial zone lands. And there are other locations that are possible. So there's light industrial zone land, and I'll tell you why I'm saying this, in Crozet on 240, where the former frozen food plant is and the former Acme Visible. There's enough land over there to build data centers on both sides of the tracks, and they did not identify that as a potential site. So I don't know why we found 5 and they did 4. I think if they had supervisors saying we don't like this one or that one, I'm kind of shocked about the former State Farm site just because it's so small. So I wouldn't assume that there wouldn't be more or less depending upon how this goes. And it actually could be neighborhoods, and we know that already there are neighborhood associations that are now aware of what's going on and starting to get active.
And because I raise it because obviously one way of limiting the impact of these things is limiting the area in which they might be built. So I would think that would be a strategic issue.
Except that they're not going to say you can't have a data center outside the overlay district.
Mhm.
It's only they would be by right all the way up to in those. So they're trying to steer, which is standard planning. They're trying to say, here's where there'd be the least impactful sites. And with these performance requirements, they can be by right. It doesn't mean that you couldn't have a data center in another location. So,
I see. Okay.
including commercial zone land. So it's not just light industrial.
Okay. Well, I can see.
That's what's concerning about this.
My second question was, you've mentioned some of the supervisors' thoughts, and I would only ask you if there were public statements here. But you mentioned Mike Pruitt was opposed to these, and I was curious, has Mike stated his reason for concerns or opposition in meetings?
He did, and I'm not going to try to paraphrase, but he basically cited the scale of these projects at that size and the potential impacts. That was where he was drawing a line.
Okay.
He also, I believe, I'd have to go back and listen, but I think he raised the issue of cutting out community engagement and legislative review and hearing what the planning commission would have to say. So none of that would be part of the conversation in a by right. And I think, I think that was
That's
something
encouraging.
yeah.
Because he normally has been gung ho for kind of anything in development, any development in the rural area. So I'm surprised to see that he's somewhat opposed to this.
But it's good to know.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks so
Bill?
much.
Thanks so much. This was very informative, and I was going to ask the president about transmission, but it sounds like you're all over that. But I do have two questions. One relates to Mike Pruitt. I mean, as people probably know, they've gotten fundraising letters. He's running for Congress.
Yeah.
You see that becoming a district, congressional district issue, where the parties may focus on it seriously.
I don't have the answer to that. I mean, as you all probably know, PEC's nonpartisan. I do
Well, we
pay.
are all too. I'm just asking if it's
Yeah,
there.
I don't know, so I don't get the details. I mean, I'm certainly aware of who's running for office, and I do read about it, but I don't have a bigger sort of analytical picture of what's going on with the Democratic Party and whether there seems to be pressure. It's the donors are the ones who, if he's looking for certain sources of funds, and those donors that are here around Charlottesville, um, conceivably would be very opposed to data centers by right, and they're probably paying attention to the bigger picture, and they actually might be looking at the what's going on with energy generation, the grid, Dominion. I don't want to go too much farther because somebody can connect the dots here, but that could very well be what's going on.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay, my other question, I guess, is also a little bit of a political one. Who are the big private players in this? I mean, are we looking at Amazon? Are we looking at, who are the big uh, private interests that are pushing for the to do away with the special use requirement?
So I do not know whether there are lobbyists for the data center developer and operator world working on. They could be coming through Williams Mullen. I just don't know. But they're more than the top five. There are scores of companies that are large enough to come down and build data centers of scale. Yep. And just so you know, the military doesn't just build their own data centers. They actually contract with
They contract,
AWS
I know.
to use that space, that storage,
Yeah.
and those CPUs.
I think we have time thanks a lot, Rob, and for everyone who's asked questions. I think we have time for one more question on this topic. And Sage.
I guess I wanted to say uh, that the resources that Rob at PEC and SELC have been working on have been great. Like I got a copy of the open letter that SELC sent, and it's really good. It just yeah, and you mentioned that you had staff, like all these organizations that you're working with have staff. I mean, I wonder if there's any way that staff could help kind of get some non-sciencey people in the community, like me and other environmental justice organizations and people who care about those things involved, because that's where that is so hard to do and it takes so much time, and those resources are just really high level. I mean, it's just like in terms of breaking that down and putting it, I mean, that's where the challenge is. And so if there was any way to do that, I know there's someone I know who's campaigning hard for immigrant rights and against the surveillance state. And one thing that her group does is they will put together kind of speeches to read at like city and county meetings. And because she has the expert, she's a lawyer, and so she can put this information together in a way that those of us who care about the issue really can't. And then that information gets distributed. And so there might be like 6 of us that go and present an opinion at the board. We totally agree with it. We just didn't have the technical skills or the legal skills to write it. And so that might be another. I don't know if that's possible for collaboration, but I think that there are people that are functioning at your level, that the level of people in this room can function at, and then there are the rest of us, like the constituents, right, that just can't work at that level. And that's what would be helpful if there's some help to bridge the gap. That's what I'm trying to, would love to see do and happen, and to be involved in that, because that's where the disconnect is, I think, in terms of getting more people out there, because the work you do is great. I'm very grateful for it.
Yeah. So I drive 20 to 30 of individuals. I get to them and basically say, you understand these issues, you can speak for yourself, you can gather whatever we have. I work with multiple other organizations that are allied organizations. Most of my work, I usually send it to CIVO 100. I work with community groups, homeowner associations. And I would tell you that, we have resources, but we can't divide up our resources and go and sort of coach individuals too much. We have to hand
Yeah.
it over and say, and we try to say, this is what works. This is a good strategy under the circumstance. The board knows what PEC does, and they come to me and they say, did you just fill up my inbox? And some of this sounded a lot alike, so you have to be very careful about people speaking from their own heart and mind.
Mhm.
But having said that, we want to be successful, so we will do whatever we can within our means to help people move forward. And the way that we can do that, and I just, say it again, is I'm happy to have a conversation with those I'm already working with. I sit on the League of Women Voters as well.
Mhm.
There's a lot of organizations that don't have any staff, and they basically will turn to SELC or PEC saying, can we just sign on? I mean, we just don't have the ability to generate a whole bunch. And so that prompts the sign on letter approach.